The night was thick with desire, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and skin. The dim glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the tangled mess of sheets beneath us. My body was already burning, aching, desperate for more as Ethan pressed his lips against my neck, his hands sliding possessively over my waist. I arched into him, my breath hitching as his fingers trailed lower, teasing the sensitive skin along my hip. Ethan. His name escaped my lips in a breathless whisper, my body betraying me as I melted beneath his touch. He chuckled, his voice deep and rough with desire. "You sound so needy," he murmured, his lips grazing the shell of my ear before his teeth caught the lobe in a playful bite. "Tell me what you want, baby." I shivered at his words, my hands clutching at his broad shoulders as I tried to pull him closer. "You," I whispered. "I want you." His response was immediate. He flipped me onto my back, pinning my wrists above my head as his mouth captured mine in a searing kiss. His tongue teased, coaxed, demanded. I moaned against his lips, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist as the heat between us intensified. He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching mine, filled with something raw and primal. "You have no idea what you do to me, Natalie," he said, his voice thick with hunger. I bit my lip, my chest rising and falling rapidly as I stared up at him. "Then show me." A smirk curled at the corner of his lips before he obliged. His mouth traveled lower, leaving a trail of heat down my neck, my collarbone, until he reached my breasts. His tongue flicked over my nipple, sending a shockwave of pleasure through me as his hand squeezed the other, his thumb brushing over the hardened peak. I gasped, my fingers tangling in his hair as I arched into his touch. "Ethan." He hummed in satisfaction, his free hand sliding down my stomach, teasing the space between my thighs. My body trembled in anticipation, my breath coming in short, uneven pants as he took his time, tormenting me with slow, deliberate strokes. "You're so wet for me," he murmured, his voice laced with dark amusement. "I could do this all night. Just watch you fall apart beneath me." I whimpered, my body writhing beneath him as I tried to push myself closer. "Please." He groaned, his control slipping as he finally gave in. His fingers found me, moving with an agonizing precision that had my toes curling against the sheets. Every stroke, every movement sent me higher, my body tightening like a coiled spring, desperate for release. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take any more, he replaced his fingers with his mouth. I cried out, my hands fisting the sheets as waves of pleasure crashed over me. He didn't stop, didn't slow, his tongue working me relentlessly until I shattered beneath him, my body trembling as the pleasure overwhelmed me. I barely had time to catch my breath before he was on me again, his body pressing me into the mattress, his need evident in the way he moved against me. "Tell me you want me," he demanded, his voice rough as he positioned himself at my entrance. I met his gaze, my own filled with nothing but desire. "I want you," I whispered, and then he was inside me. The world blurred, the only thing I could focus on was the way he felt, the way he filled me so completely, the way our bodies moved together in perfect sync. He set a relentless pace, each thrust pushing me closer to the edge, each moan that escaped his lips fueling the fire burning between us. I clung to him, my nails digging into his back as I lost myself in him, in this moment, in the way he made me feel like I was the only thing that mattered. We reached the peak together, our cries mixing as we fell, consumed by the pleasure that overtook us. After, we lay tangled in each other's arms, our breaths still ragged, our bodies slick with sweat. Ethan pressed a lazy kiss to my forehead, his fingers tracing idle patterns along my spine. "I love you," he murmured, his voice softer now tender. I smiled against his skin, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I love you too." For a moment, everything felt perfect, safe, like the outside world didn't exist. But perfection is always an illusion, and mine was about to shatter. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the bedroom. I stirred, my body still humming from the night before, the warmth of Ethan's arms wrapped securely around me. I turned slightly, taking in the peaceful expression on his face as he slept, his breathing steady, his features relaxed. He looked so perfect like this, so utterly mine. I traced my fingers over his bare chest, enjoying the feel of his skin beneath my touch. But as I lay there, reality began to seep in. The weight of responsibilities, of the life we had built together, pressed against my mind. I had a meeting in a few hours, calls to return, errands to run. The real world was waiting. Carefully, I slid out of bed, grabbing Ethan's shirt from the floor and slipping it over my body. It smelled like him, clean, masculine, familiar. I smiled to myself as I made my way to the kitchen, the cool tiles soothing against my bare feet. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text, probably from my assistant, reminding me of my schedule. But when I picked it up, a chill ran down my spine. Unknown number. Your husband isn't who you think he is. My heart stopped for a beat. I blinked, staring at the screen. Confusion and unease creeping in. A prank? A mistake? I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching me. The apartment was silent except for the faint sounds of the city outside. Swallowing, I set the phone down, brushing off the uneasy feeling settling in my gut. I told myself it was nothing, but then it happened again. That night, as I was preparing for bed, another message appeared. Unknown number. I can prove it. Do you want to see? My fingers hovered over the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the words sent a pulse of dread through me. Against my better judgment, I typed back. Me? Who is this? Seconds later, a reply came. Unknown number. Check your email. My stomach twisted as I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I clicked into my inbox. There it was, an email from an untraceable address. No subject, just a single attachment. I hesitated. Then, taking a deep breath, I clicked on it. The screen filled with a photograph. And suddenly the world around me tilted. Ethan. With another man. It wasn't just a friendly embrace. Wasn't just a casual moment caught on camera. It was intimate. His hand rested on the man's thigh, their faces inches apart. Eyes locked in a way I had only ever seen him look at me. I stared. My vision blurring. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. My hands felt cold. My entire body numb as a single thought screamed in my mind. No, this wasn't real. It couldn't be. The sound of the shower running in the bathroom snapped me back to reality. Ethan. Just a few feet away. Completely unaware that I had just seen something that could destroy us. I closed the laptop with shaking hands, my breaths coming in short, uneven bursts. I needed to know more. So I did something I never thought I would do. I started digging. The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia and doubt. I watched Ethan more closely, searched for signs I had never bothered to see before. Every late meeting, every unexplained phone call, every moment he seemed distant. It all came rushing back, painting a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. And then I saw him. With him. It was a cold evening when I followed him. He had said he was meeting an old friend for drinks. I smiled, kissed him goodbye, told him to have fun. And then I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my coat and slipping out into the night. My heart pounded as I trailed him through the city streets, keeping my distance, but never letting him out of sight. He arrived at a small, dimly lit bar tucked away in a quiet corner of town. A place I had never been. A place I was sure he had never mentioned. And that's when I saw him. Tall. Handsome. Familiar. My blood ran cold. It was Ryan. Ethan's best friend. The man who had been by his side for years. The man I had trusted. The man I had once loved. I stood frozen in the shadows, my heart hammering violently against my ribcage. My fingers curled into fists as I watched them, Ethan and Ryan, seated in a secluded booth at the back of the bar. The dim lighting cast flickering shadows over their faces. But I could still see everything clearly. The way Ethan leaned in, his fingers grazing Ryan's wrist. The soft smile that played on Ryan's lips. The look in Ethan's eyes, warm, familiar, intimate. My stomach twisted. I knew that look. I had seen it 1,000 times before, directed at me. But not anymore. Ethan whispered something and Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. Then, to my horror, Ryan reached out and traced a slow, deliberate line along Ethan's jaw, his thumb lingering just beneath his lips. Ethan didn't pull away. I felt like I couldn't breathe. A part of me wanted to storm in there, demand answers, scream, cry, do something. But my body refused to move. I was trapped, paralyzed by the cruel reality unfolding before my eyes. I needed to get out of there. Turning on my heel, I hurried out onto the street, the cold night air biting at my skin. My breaths came in short, ragged bursts as I tried to calm myself. But nothing was working. This wasn't just a meaningless fling. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was real. And it had been happening right under my nose. I needed answers. Now. I was sitting on the couch, my hands wrapped tightly around a glass of wine when Ethan finally came home. The scent of his cologne hit me before he even spoke. "Hey baby," he greeted, shrugging off his coat. "You're still up?" I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man I had loved for years. The man I thought I knew better than anyone else. And yet I knew nothing at all. "I couldn't sleep," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. Ethan walked over and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. His touch burned. "You okay?" he asked, his brows furrowing in concern. I almost laughed. I wanted to scream in his face, to throw my wine at him, to demand to know how long he had been lying to me. But instead I smiled. "I'm fine, Elid." His lips curled into a relieved smile, and he settled beside me, stretching his arm across the back of the couch. "How was your night?" I asked, feigning nonchalance. Ethan yawned, rubbing his temple. "Long work was exhausting. I grabbed a quick drink with a couple of guys from the office, but nothing exciting." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Liar. Every word out of his mouth was a carefully crafted deception. And I let him say it. I let him sit there pretending everything was normal while I knew I needed more. "Ryan called me today," I said, watching his face closely. Ethan stiffened barely, but I noticed. "Oh," he said casually. "What about?" I shrugged, sipping my wine. "Just catching up." Ethan nodded, forcing a yawn. "That's nice. I haven't seen him in a while." My nails dug into my palm. "You sure about that?" I asked, tilting my head. For a split second his mask slipped. His lips parted. His eyes flickering with something, panic, maybe? But then just as quickly he recovered, chuckling softly. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Why?" I set my glass down and turned to fully face him. "Because I saw you," I said. Ethan froze. The air between us shifted. "I saw you tonight, Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. "With him." His entire body tensed, his jaw locking. Silence stretched between us like a live wire, crackling with unspoken confessions and undeniable truths. Then he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my chest tightening. "How long?" Ethan didn't answer. I slammed my hand against the coffee table. "How long, Ethan?" His eyes snapped to mine. And finally, he spoke. 3 years, he admitted. A sharp, jagged pain tore through my chest. I felt like I had been punched. 3 years. I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been with him for 3 years?" Ethan's face was etched with something that almost looked like regret. "It's not. Don't." I held up a hand, shaking my head. "Don't you fucking dare try to explain this away." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I loved you," I said, my voice breaking. "I gave you everything. And the entire time, you were." I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. "You were with him." Ethan sighed, running a hand down his face. "It's complicated." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "No," I said. "It's actually pretty fucking simple." I stood up, grabbing my phone. "I want you to leave." Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me." My voice was cold, emotionless. "Get out." "Olivia." "Please," he pleaded, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "It's not." "I don't care." I cut him off. "I don't care how you justify it. I don't care what excuses you have. You don't get to do this to me and still pretend like you love me." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out, because we both knew whatever love had once existed between us was gone. And I wasn't going to fight for something that had already been destroyed. I turned away before I could see the look in his eyes, because deep down, no matter how much he had hurt me, no matter how much I wanted to hate him, a part of me still loved him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty space where Ethan should have been. The silence was suffocating. My mind replayed our conversation, his confession, the way his voice wavered when he admitted it had been 3 years. 3 years. I had spent my days believing I was in a happy marriage, that I was loved, that I was enough. But the entire time, he had been loving someone else. Someone I had trusted. The pain was unbearable. But beneath it, something else was starting to take shape. Rage. The next morning, Ethan was gone. His closet was half empty, his shoes missing from the doorway. He had packed quickly. Probably sometime in the middle of the night. Good. I didn't want to see his face. But there was still someone I needed to see. Ryan. I found him at his apartment. His eyes widening the moment he saw me standing at his doorstep. He hesitated, gripping the doorframe, like he was debating whether to invite me in or slam the door in my face. Olivia, he said slowly. I pushed past him before he could stop me. His place was neat, too neat. Like he had been expecting me. I turned to face him, arms crossed. How long were you going to let me live a lie? Ryan sighed, rubbing his face. I didn't want you to find out like this. But you didn't stop it, I snapped. You didn't care that you were sleeping with my husband? His jaw clenched. You think this was easy for me? I scoffed. Easy for you? My voice dripped with disbelief. You were fucking my husband for 3 years, Ryan. You tell me, how hard could it have been? He flinched, guilt flashing in his eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I deserve the truth, I said, my voice quieter now. Not just about you and Ethan, but about us. Ryan's body went rigid. I took a step closer. I remember the accident. I remember sitting in that hospital waiting for you to wake up. And when you finally did, you looked at me like I was a stranger. Ryan's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. I thought I lost you. I whispered. But I didn't, did I? His gaze dropped to the floor. Olivia, don't. You didn't forget me. The realization hit me like a freight train. You left me. Ryan squeezed his eyes shut. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was. He exhaled shakily, dragging a hand through his hair. When I woke up after the accident, everything was fractured. I remembered things, but they felt distant, blurry, like pieces of a life that didn't belong to me. I crossed my arms. But you knew who I was. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. Tears burned in my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Then why did you act like I meant nothing to you? Ryan looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time I saw it. The pain. The regret. Because Ethan made me believe you had moved on, he admitted. The air in the room shifted. What? I breathed. Ryan's jaw tightened. When I was in the hospital, Ethan was there. He told me you were with him, that you had already chosen him. His voice was bitter, raw. He said you had been seeing each other long before my accident. My stomach twisted violently. That's a lie. I know that now, Ryan said. But back then I was already so messed up. I didn't trust myself, didn't trust my memories. And Ethan, he was there always. He took care of me. I felt like I was going to be sick. Ethan had orchestrated everything. He had made Ryan believe I had betrayed him, manipulated his fragile state, and then what? Used it to pull him closer? I shook my head in disbelief. You let him take you. Ryan's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. He didn't take me, Olivia. His voice was hollow. I let him. I stumbled back a step, my hands trembling. You loved me, I whispered. We were supposed to have a life together. Ryan swallowed hard. I know. Tears finally slipped down my cheeks. But you let him destroy us. Ryan's face twisted in agony. I didn't know how to fight for you. I closed my eyes, my breath shuddering. Everything I had known, everything I had believed about my life, had been a carefully crafted lie. And Ethan had been the puppeteer. A cruel, calculating bastard who had taken everything from me. I turned for the door. Olivia, wait. I stopped but didn't look back. I never stopped loving you, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something in me cracked. I forced myself to keep walking. Because love wasn't enough anymore. Not after everything. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city. The streets a blur of neon lights and the occasional honking of impatient drivers. My mind was in chaos, replaying every moment, every lie, every betrayal. Ethan had stolen everything from me. Not just my marriage. Not just my love. But my past. My future. He had taken Ryan from me in a way that was irreversible. And yet, the worst part was knowing Ryan had let him. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. I had spent years believing in a love that never truly existed. Living a life that had been carefully constructed by a man who had never truly loved me. Not in the way I thought. A sharp knock on my window startled me. I blinked, realizing I had pulled over somewhere near the pier. A figure stood outside my car, illuminated by the orange glow of a streetlight. Ryan. I hesitated before rolling the window down. His eyes were desperate. Olivia, please. We need to talk. I scoffed. Talk? What's left to say? He exhaled sharply. Everything. Nothing. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair. But I can't let this be the last time I see you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why? Because Ethan hasn't given you permission to let me go yet. Ryan flinched. That's not fair. I let out a bitter laugh. Fair? You want to talk about fair? What part of this has been fair to me, Ryan? His eyes darkened with something that looked like guilt. You're right, he admitted. None of this is fair to you. But I swear, Olivia, I never meant to hurt you. Then why did you? My voice cracked. Ryan looked away, jaw clenched. Because I was weak. Because I let him manipulate me. His hands curled into fists. Because I thought I didn't deserve you. I shook my head. You don't. He inhaled sharply but didn't argue. A long silence stretched between us. Then softly he said, let me make this right. I let out a shaky breath. You can't. But I can try. His voice was raw. If you let me. I stared at him, searching for something, hope, sincerity, anything that could undo the damage. But there was nothing. Because some things couldn't be undone. I shook my head. Goodbye, Ryan. I rolled up the window before he could say anything else, before I could change my mind. Then I drove away, leaving him standing there, under the cold glow of the streetlights, watching me disappear. I filed for divorce the next day. Ethan didn't fight me. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to salvage. Maybe he was tired of the charade. Or maybe he never really cared about me at all. Either way, it didn't matter. I was done. But just because I was done didn't mean I was free. Because Ethan wasn't just my husband. He was a man who had spent years controlling every aspect of my life, shaping my reality to fit his desires. And he wasn't the type to let go so easily. So when I woke up one night to the feeling of someone watching me, I wasn't surprised to find Ethan sitting in the armchair across the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I simply sat up, meeting his gaze. How did you get in? He smirked. You should be more careful with your locks. I exhaled slowly. What do you want? Ethan tilted his head, studying me. You, Olivia. I've always wanted you. I clenched my fists beneath the covers. You never wanted me. You wanted control. His smirk widened. Is there a difference? I felt sick. I should have been afraid. But I wasn't. Because fear meant he still had power over me. And I refused to give him that. So I lifted my chin. Get out. Ethan chuckled. You used to be so sweet. So obedient. His gaze darkened. It's almost a shame to see you like this. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I mean it, Ethan. Leave. His jaw tightened. And if I don't? I reached beneath my pillow, fingers closing around the cold steel of the knife I had started keeping there. Ethan's eyes flickered to my hand, amusement dancing across his face. Really, Olivia? You think you could hurt me? I tightened my grip. Try me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly he stood. He walked toward me, stopping just at the edge of the bed. I didn't lower the knife. He smiled. This isn't over. Then he turned and walked out, disappearing into the night. And I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. A week later, Ethan left the city. No one knew where he went. And I didn't care to find out. Ryan tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored his calls. I needed to move on. I needed to heal. So I did. I got a new apartment, a new job, a new life. And for the first time in years, I was free. But some ghosts don't stay buried. Because one night, months later, I came home to find a letter sitting on my kitchen counter. There was no return address, no name, just 3 words, scrawled in Ethan's familiar handwriting. See you soon.